Happy New Year, everyone. This is Mari Robeson of Love Lulu Creative, a podcast that supports and celebrates artists and creative entrepreneurs while giving back to the community in a unique and meaningful way. This is episode number 9. This is also the very first episode for 2019. I knew I wanted to kick off 2019 with a big pop of color, and I have the most amazing artist for you to meet today, Gina Julian. I love her work. Gina is a hard edge abstraction painter, and she is also a master of color and the play of color. I enjoyed this episode so much because I learned so much from her. She also is so generous about sharing what it's like to be an artist, a full-time artist, and what that looks like running a business on a day-to-day basis. She's got some excellent tips that she shares that I'm definitely going to be incorporating into my own creative business. Just a really fun, lively episode. Also, Gina is my featured artist for January, and she's so generously letting me share some of her origami prints. They're so beautiful, and they'll be available for the month of January in my online shop under the Give Back category, marirobeson.bigcartel.com, where the proceeds from that will be going to the Memorial Art Scholarship. And I'm super excited about that because the first scholarships are going to be awarded this spring. So yay, we're going to be finally able to hand out some scholarships and support some young artists and pay it forward that way. Speaking of paying it forward, if you're enjoying this episode and you like this YouTube channel, I would love it if you would subscribe and share it with your friends that are interested in creative career, because what this is all about is I am trying to bring to you the best of the best, and they are sharing their experience, they're sharing their words of advice. This is stuff you don't get in school. You don't get this in a book. You get it by doing the work day to day and then learning from these people. And they're all so accomplished, and they're also generous with their advice. So if you'd help me get the word out, I would deeply appreciate that. Other than that, let's get started for a really super fun episode with the very talented and very beautiful Gina Julian. Hello, Gina. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
I am so excited to start the year off with your beautiful artwork and your lovely self. And I can't wait to get into this conversation with you because I've been following you for a while and on Instagram, and I just love everything that you do. It's so happy, and it just, every time I stop and I pause, it's just beautiful.
You are so sweet. Thank you. And I've been following you forever too. So we're going to have lots to talk about.
We do. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So let's start with where you're from.
I am from Nashville, Tennessee, born and raised, lived here all my life, and I considered moving, but I just really like it here. It's, it's changed a little bit in the past, I'd say 5 years, but, for the most part, I still love it. It's still the town I grew up in. And actually right now I live about 20 minutes south of Nashville in a little town called Franklin, which is still close enough to home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I love it.
It's on my bucket list. It's definitely a place I would like to visit.
Yeah.
The music capital. Yeah.
It's become quite the tourist town.
Oh, really? Is it
Yeah.
a big tourist town? But I could call you and you could say, no, don't go there. Go to this restaurant.
It changes so fast around here. It's crazy. It's just, restaurants are booming. Hotels are booming. There's just so much stuff to do downtown. And now that I'm outside of Nashville, I don't get into the city as much as I used to. So every time I go back, it's kind of like, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
That's new.
I'm in a really small town in the Central Coast of California, right by the beach. And there's a bigger town where I went to college next to me, and I don't even recognize it anymore. And I went to college there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good economy.
That's the way it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be thankful for it. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So did you always think that you were going to be an artist? What was high school like for you?
Well, I was not raised the way most people raise their kids to say, you got to grow up, you got to find what you want to do. You got to, my parents were just really easygoing, and they never really pushed me or my sister to do any one certain thing, or even asked us what we wanted to do, quite frankly. we just sort of assumed that we would do the best we could and we would land wherever wherever our abilities would take us. And that was that. So high school, I took commercial art because I was interested in art, and we had a fantastic vocational wing in our high school. And we had 3,000 students. So that's quite a number of students.
That's a big school. Yeah.
It is. But the vocational wing had commercial art. We also had fine art. And so, when deciding between the two, I picked commercial art because it was a 2-hour class and fine art was only 1 hour. So it's like, I get to do art for 2 hours. Yes, I'm going to sign up for this one.
Absolutely.
And then plus, you kind of look at commercial art and fine art and it's like, this one makes money. This one does not. That was sort of the mindset back then. And so I took commercial art, and I took it sophomore, junior, and senior year. And unfortunately, our teacher did not teach commercial art at all.
That's crazy.
I know. He was just riding out his last years until retirement. He was a sweet man, but he did not teach us anything because he was not really a commercial artist. He didn't know anything about working with printers. He was an illustrator. And so illustrators were also deemed commercial artists back then just because they did illustrations and they would submit it to publications or whatever, or these art companies who like to reproduce artwork and sell it. But as far as our modern day interpretation, or what it was supposed to be back then, was, you worked as a typesetter or a graphic designer because that was just coming out. And, you learned paste up and you worked with Rubylith and proportion wheels and things like that, And so we did not learn any of that, unfortunately. But what I did learn was I learned to typeset because we did have a Tandy computer. The teacher didn't know how to use it, but there was a guy named James and he was a senior. And I asked him what he was doing one day, and he said, well, here, I'll show you, And so he taught me to use PageMaker.
Yes, good old PageMaker.
Old school, oldest PageMaker. Version 1, girl.
Oh my gosh.
Version 1. I remember my age. Yeah. So I learned PageMaker from him, and I would draw my drawings, and then he taught me to set type. And, on a page, and then he taught me how to scan my drawing and then put it on the page with that type, and I could print it out as a complete page, And so I ended up doing all the programs for the school because our printing department was next door. So I would typeset the program. I would then take it over to the printing department. They would work their magic, and suddenly we would have programs for the school plays.
That's an excellent practical experience. Like, really being able to apply it right away. That's great.
If I had had any idea that I could have made money with that, I would have done a lot sooner. So that was my experience in high school. And, a little bit later in life, I went to college for pre-med because I got a scholarship. It was a working scholarship. And I had the choice between art and science. Those were my two interests. I liked them pretty equally at the time. And I was good at both. And so whichever path I chose, that was going to determine where I worked on the campus when I went to school. And so initially I chose art because that's kind of where my heart was. But then my brain's like, no, just change it, go science. So I did. I changed midstream. But what they did was they signed me up to work in the slide library in the art department. And so I was taking pre-med classes while doing my work in the art department. And so that was a little bit of my art education, just having to file the slides and label them, the new ones that came through. So all the professors would do their lectures and I would get all these slides, coming back. And that's a little bit how I learned who was who. Because I had really had absolutely no art education. I mean, I knew people like Dolly and Warhol and, anything that was parodied on Bugs Bunny growing up, because that's where kids got back then. Seriously. I mean, they would do little spoofs on the persistence of memory and, things like that. So,
That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could learn a lot about classical music from Bugs Bunny.
Wow.
There was lots to learn. It was really sort of an adult cartoon. But anyway.
It actually was. Yeah. There's some crazy stuff with it.
Yeah. So, but that's really all of the artists that I knew growing up was what I had seen on TV. And so, you know, getting a little bit of an education through the slide library was kind of cool.
So you didn't really pick up then doing like the type of artwork that you do now until later, or?
Correct. Yeah. I did not formally start really painting until I was in my 30s. I was somewhere around, I think 33-ish. Mm-hmm. And I started freelancing on the side, and I created a magazine with another guy, and it was Nashville Arts Magazine. So I was the graphic designer, and he was technically the owner, the editor. And so he would take care of getting the articles written, getting the photography done. It would all come to me, and I would work with the advertisers, and then I typeset the whole magazine and put it together every month. It was a monthly publication. And
again, you were doing graphics and you were exposed to all the art. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I got to know all of the artists around town, and those, national artists that came to the galleries as well. I went out to all the events, and it was really a nice time. It was something I was really passionate about because Nashville had always been known for country music. We had two main industries at the time. One was printing and the other was country music. And country music was kind of, I hate to say it, but it was going through a really bad slump at the time. And people were just losing interest, and a lot of country music singers were turning over to pop, and it was just like, what is happening here? So it was a good time to show people, hey, Nashville's got a burgeoning art community. And we're not just known for, for these other things. So, and it focused on visual arts. It wasn't performance arts. It was strictly visual arts. And I did that for 2 years.
So is that what kind of inspired you to
start painting?
Paintbrush?
Yeah, because I saw these other artists. I was like, man, I bet I could do that.
Well, and it's super interesting because your artwork definitely has that graphic design background. Like you can absolutely see that part of you in all your work that you do.
Mm-hmm. It comes out a lot. It either comes out in bold color or it comes out in sort of linear shapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was on your Instagram, and there was a really gorgeous photo of an entryway, a foyer with your artwork in it in kind of a traditional setting. And I want to read what you wrote because I just think it's just fabulous. You said, when I created my OptArt print collection, I knew that I wanted to create pieces that would speak to my journey as an artist. Hence the graphic design, right? This piece inspired one of those prints because it made me realize what a bold statement this art can make in a home. It stands contrary to its surroundings, as I often do, and it ignites curiosity about the person who lives there. I love making art that invites conversation. I just think that is so authentic, and so it just is so great. So there's two points about that. I want to know about how you go about getting your artwork in all these beautiful settings.
Okay.
Like that's a gorgeous one.
Okay, so I'll tackle that. I went to design school when I turned 40. I had been working in ad agencies and web development companies, and I was just like, you know what? I want to get to my decorating roots because I love decorating, as many people do. I had built 2 homes at that point, so I felt comfortable with the building process, at least residential anyway. And I thought, well, I should hone these skills. And I asked my husband, I was like, what would you think if I went to, interior design school? And he said, well, I've always wanted to be married to an interior designer. And so I was like, okay.
That's kind of a funny response.
But the joke is that he says that about everything. Hey, honey, what would you think if I did web development? He's like, I've always wanted to be married to a web developer. And he'll see my art hanging on the wall. He'll say, I'm going out with the girl who did that.
I love that.
He's a sweetheart.
That is so sweet.
I'm married up.
Nice job. Good job.
Yeah. So through going to design school, I happened to meet a lot of other fabulous women who eventually became interior designers. I decided to stop after 1 year. I learned a lot of good skills, but I just felt that it wasn't for me, and I really wanted to paint instead, and that was sort of my passion. It kind of transitioned to that, and they're very closely linked, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of these people still remain my friends, and I still get together with them. So that particular entryway is owned by Minette Jackson of Minette Jackson Interiors, and she has a very traditional style. And I just thought, when I was creating this op art collection, I was like, how can I show people what this would look like? Because I can hang it in my home all day long. I've only got so many places to put it, but I need a different point of view. And I asked her, I said, hey, can I hang this in your foyer and shoot pictures of it? She's like, sure, bring it on over. So we took her grandmother's mirror off the wall, and she let me hang that up, and we styled it, and it looked so good. And
so good.
And I put it up there, and she's like, whoa, that really looks good. And I'm like, yeah. And so that's how that was born. And I just love that it was such a juxtaposition of the ultra modern against her very traditional style. And it's one of my favorite ways to use the op art. I love seeing it in settings like that. I've got a few other photos on my Instagram where people have used it in that way. And I always love it. I think it draws attention to the decor and the art at the same time.
Absolutely. And the way that all the colors are very analogous there, so even though it's a very traditional setting and it's a very contemporary piece of art, all the colors are playing so nicely together that it creates like this whole party. Yeah. It's really, really lovely. And that is a super great tip to any artists out there. Ask your friends if you can hang your art in their home and take a picture. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. I never even thought about that. And I think that's such a brilliant idea.
Yeah. I have another friend. Actually, she's my other friend. The three of us are friends. Her name is Catherine Birschbach, and then we have Minette Jackson. And so Minette is like uber traditional, and Catherine lands on the other side of the spectrum where she's really modern. So I took paintings over to her house, and they work great, and I took photos, and she let me put holes in her walls, and I was so thankful. And I land somewhere in between the two of them, I think, because I have a love of traditional, but I also, I've got antiques in my home, but at the same time, a lot of my home is modern. And so I just thought it was nice that I had those two extremes.
And they have,
where I could show my art.
Yeah, they have gorgeous homes. You all have gorgeous homes.
Yeah, thank you.
Part two of what I wanted to get to with that is your work. When I look at it, and now that I know that you have this graphic design background, it speaks so authentic. And we see a lot of things of people copying other artists and stuff out there. And I'm just wondering what were your thoughts on that?
I think that when you look at a piece of art, you can usually tell if it's genuine or not. If you do a little digging, especially on someone's Instagram, they'll usually leave you clues as to why they do what they do. And I think that a true artist, and not someone that's just going through the motions of trying to replicate something, they leave something of themselves in the art. So you look at my art, and well, you tell me, Mari, what do you think of when you look at my art? Like, what are some adjectives that come to mind?
well, definitely bold and colorful and striking, and lots of personality. But also, I can see that you're a perfectionist, and you're very within the lines. And I mean, that that's a certain kind of person. I mean, I
right.
mean, you can really see your personality.
And that is so me.
Yeah, you can see it. And even in something that's kind of considered more abstract, you can really see who you are.
Right. And, in my abstracts, in my looser abstracts, I have a hard time loosening up. It takes me longer to do them because of that. But yes, when I was a kid, I was a color inside the lines kind of kid. I did not want that crayon to go outside. And if it did, the whole thing's just ruined,
Oh my gosh. It's so funny. And it so shows in your work. So I think that's true. And like, I like to paint room sketches because I'm an interior designer. So like, that's like the room that I would like to live in.
Yeah.
No client would ever let me have a pink ceiling.
Right. I love a pink ceiling.
I love a pink ceiling. But even my husband, I don't think will let me have a pink ceiling. But we'll see.
One. You just need a room.
You do? You have a pink ceiling?
I used to.
I knew I liked you.
I'll send you pictures. Yeah, it's.
I think I just need to go live in the South because everything's way more colorful there than it is in California. Like everything here is very Tuscan villa. I mean,
oh wow, yeah,
it's very different than we're Spanish. Just we don't have these old traditional homes with this color.
Well, it's so funny because my husband's never complained, even when I did put pink everywhere. Although I did feel a little self-conscious when we first moved into this house, and I was kind of filling it with crazy color, I mean, it was really crazy and bright. And I started toning it down, but now color's creeping back in and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go for it. But I think that there's a sophisticated way to do any color.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a very wrong way to color.
Yeah. So you've got to find that nice balance. And also, we ride motorcycles. And so when we built this house, we turned the sunroom into a motorcycle shop for him. So it doesn't matter what I do in the rest of the house.
You can basically have the rest of the house.
That's what.
And the outside of the house.
That's what we agreed on. We said, this in the garage is yours.
Okay.
And the rest of the house is
Tip number 2, people. That's how you make a marriage work. Give your husband his own motorcycle room.
If you don't have a motorcycle room, figure out a room you can convert to one.
Okay, I'm not going to let my husband listen to this.
Shop. Or you get what I'm saying. If he has a hobby that requires a room, just like we have a hobby that requires a room, then I think it's fitting to do, to accommodate. We all want a functional home. So.
I feel so bad for my husband because we have 3 daughters and 2 female cats, and that poor guy has lived with pink and can't color. And anyway, he's good. He doesn't.
Well, the way I look at it is that I've worked in mostly male-dominated jobs most of my life, and I also participated in a male-dominated sport for 10 years. And so after all of that, I deserve a little pink in my life.
What sport was that?
My husband and I raced motorcycles on the racetrack, and we did not do formal racing, like there wasn't a trophy. We did what's called track days. And so you get out on a racetrack on your sport bike with about 50 other people, and you just go as fast as you can, and you try to beat your own lap records. Doing actual racing will negate your life insurance.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so as you get older, that stuff matters.
You kind of want to live a little bit.
Yeah.
I actually had a motorcycle when I was in college. That was the way I got around.
Well, it's a huge part of my, my life and my past, and I still enjoy riding. I retired from the track, but I think that actually comes out in my art, and you'll see some of my artwork is named after things having to do with racing. So I've named paintings things like the chicane, which is a sharp left-right turn. And then like one turn, and then, you flip-flop to the other side, and, the back straight, and, things like that.
That's really interesting.
And some of my paintings have strong motion to them. I like paintings that have not just dimension, but motion. And one of my latest designs that I did in my last series has like a zigzag in it. And I tend to name things after like adrenaline fueled activities, So one of them is zip line and another is zinger, and it's like, I like to have that pow in it.
Yeah.
That's part of me.
Absolutely. There we go. Well, tell me about the origami art, because I I know that was you did that a little
Oh,
earlier, but I
yeah.
love it so much, and
Thank you.
it's so
That was a
fun.
special set that I created specifically for the Nashville Parade of Homes. There was a home that was being done by Lori Paranjape, and she is Mrs. Paranjape. If you don't know her, you should look her up. She's an amazing designer. She is extremely popular right now. Like she's hit her stride, and she was designing this. Gosh, I can't even remember the square footage. It seemed like it was huge, like over 10,000 square feet. The thing was massive to me.
Wow.
And she called me one day and she said, "Hey, are you working, have you got any new ideas brewing?" And she's a very smart lady because she wants the new upcoming stuff. She doesn't want the stuff that everyone's seen. She wants the new stuff. And I get that. And so I told her that I had been contemplating doing this series of origami animals. And she's like, "Oh, that sounds like it'd be perfect for the nursery. Let me send you the design boards." So she sent them to me. And I mean, it was like a match made in heaven. And I sent her mock-ups of what, kind of quick sketches of what I planned for these pieces. And she's like, "Let's do it." So I did a set of, I believe, 9 of them. And they're all vector art that I drew in Illustrator.
It's amazing because they don't look like vector art. I mean, it looks like you've done some computer work with the backgrounds being
yes.
solid,
So you take it out of Illustrator and then they're put into Photoshop and drop shadowed there. So that's where you get the cast shadows. So it's a combo of Illustrator and Photoshop that created those. And then I had them printed as giclées and framed. And they're I think they're darling in that nursery. I don't think there could have been a better room for it.
Like, I would want them in my home. I know.
Exactly. They were not originally concepted for just a nursery, but I think that they do fit in there well. And, any kind of soft room, everyone loves origami, and I particularly love them. I think they're fascinating just because you're making a 3D object out of a flat thing, which is what I love to do in my art.
Mm-hmm.
I like to make 3D space on a 2-dimensional surface,
And you do it so well. I love
thanks.
it. So also the portraits. I mean, Marie is famous. She's kind of been very well. That was in your office. Was that your home office?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I would just about die if I had a home office like that. That is so gorgeous.
Thank you.
I stared at those and I can't figure out how you created those, because when I look at your opt art and you say you painted those, I sit there and think, oh my God, did she paint this like this? It's amazing.
Yeah, no, that was actually done on the computer. It was drawn in Illustrator, so it is vector art. And the style of my pop art portraits came from a popular style, and I want to say it started around 2014, maybe 2015, but it's called the Way to Pop Art Portrait. And this was an Indonesian graphic designer who created this style of vector drawing. And it just took off. Like everyone started drawing, famous celebrities. And you can actually Google WPAP. And it stands for Way to Pop Art Portrait. And you will find just a slew of these uber colorful graphic portraits. And they're really super cool. I love them.
And that's a new thing you're saying, like that. That's 2015, 14. That's only a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I mean, that's not too long ago. But, me being the graphic designer, of course, I'm, tooling around the internet and I see these things and I look into it and then I find tutorials on how to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool. So I drew my first one for my husband for a Christmas present. And I had a big, huge print printed out and framed for him. And it was of Christopher Walken because we love Christopher Walken and we think he's so kitsch and we just love him. So anyway, he's a good conversation piece. And so that was my first one. And then from there, I just found interesting people to draw. And, I would buy photographs or I would go to my friends' homes and take photographs of them. And so a few of the people in my pop art collection, pop art portrait collection, are people that I know or friends of mine. So, so yeah, that's how that all started.
I mean, what an honor to have yourself done in a portrait like that. It's interesting, and I want my daughter to listen to this because she does vector art, and has done portraits of my other daughters, and that's but that's a different style that I had not heard of. So that's definitely fun and interesting. Thank you.
It's a lot of fun. It is very, very detailed. I mean, you can get the ones that I've done, I altered. I don't do the super, super colorful ones like you'll find on the internet. Mine actually have realistic flesh tones and so that's how I sort of distinguished myself by my subject matter and color that I used. And I go into there's a lot more detail in those portraits. And the funny thing that you probably can't tell when you look at them is that there are no curved lines anywhere in any of those portraits.
What?
So if you've got one, there's not a single.
I'm gonna have to go. Oh, so interesting.
Yeah, they're all straight lines.
Wow. I'm gonna have to really blow that up and analyze. That's so cool. Gosh, you are so talented. So the Opt Art, though, is the latest, basically, series that you've done. So what kind of inspired that? And I love the play of color. So why don't you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So my optical art, or I just call it Op Art for short, that was sort of born out of my web design days. After being a graphic designer and an art director for so many years, I landed at an ad agency, and they were farming things out to a freelance, guy who did their web design. And I'm like, I can do this. I'm self-taught pretty much in everything. So why not? So I started digging into code, and I already knew how to do the graphics, so I just figured out how to do it. And so I did web design for quite a while. And then I think it was 2007 or 8. I can't remember the exact year, but no, it was 2012 maybe. Windows 7 came out, and I don't know if you're a Windows user or
no,
you're a straight Mac girl, aren't you? I am
a Mac girl from day one.
Well, working in a web development place, we had to have both kinds of computers. So Windows 7 came out, and it just kind of changed the face of interface design, because suddenly the screen popped up and there was nothing but flat squares of color, and it's like, what is this? There's no puffy buttons, there's no there's no drop shadows. Right. What is this? And so in the world of interface design, up until that point, we had what was called a fancy word called skeuomorphism. And what that meant is that you are trying to duplicate the look of a real life thing, but it's a digital thing. So, for instance, on your iPhone, way back when it first started, you would press the little notepad icon, right? And it would open up, and it would be like a yellow page, and it would have these little lines. It looked just like a notepad ledger, right? And now you open it up, and it's a blank white screen. And that's the difference. Back then, skeuomorphism, it tried to transition people into a digital world. And after we had, people had lived with a digital, device and understood how to use it, those things dropped off. They were no longer necessary. You no longer needed to make the notebook look like a fancy book with a leather-bound book with the stitching and things like that. And it didn't have to have the little lines. You knew what it was. And so flat design was born. And I'm not sure if you can even Google flat design. You probably can, and you'll see tons of, examples of that, I'm sure. So Op Art was kind of a spin-off of my flat design days when I had to adjust to that. And it was then sort of our job as web designers to make three-dimensional space out of flat color. You had to make something interesting. At least I did anyway. I hated the transition. I absolutely hated it. So this is how I embraced it. And I would make menus, navigation menus and things like that, sort of using this technique. And that's sort of how the Op Art was born. I was just messing around with some paints one day, and I made that. made my first one. It was monochromatic, and it sat around for like a year. And then my friend Carrie, I posted on Instagram, and it's like, okay, that's cool, And then I posted it again a year later, and my friend Carrie's like, is that for sale?
Is Carrie is she a designer, or is
she actually is now. She's a decorator now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So she's got something in it.
At the time, she wasn't doing decorating, I don't think, or she was doing it extremely, limited amount. But she saw it and she's like, I love that. Can I buy it? I'm like, sure, I'll give you a deal on it. So I took it to her house and she put it over her mantle. And she's got a really traditional home. And she ended up painting her entire room to go with that painting. And it happened to work with her parents' rug that she had on the floor. And it's just the most amazing space. And I mean, it's the first one. She'll always have the first. And it sort of set the tone,
Well, it's a gorgeous collection. And I love how you say, tell us about the, when you use the colors, how the play of the colors.
Well, okay, so I have always particularly been fascinated with color, even since I was a little girl. I would make collections of things just because of the color of them. It didn't matter what it was. If it was pretty, if it was colorful, I would collect it. I had an eraser collection because I loved the colors of them, not because they were erasers. So I find myself wanting, I find myself, gravitating towards certain colors and figuring out how to use them with other colors to either brighten them, darken them, make them pop more, make them pop less. One of the things that I was sort of, unknowingly doing was playing with the interaction of color, which is what Joseph Albers taught his students. And, his book is basically like a workbook, a textbook, where he would teach. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a book of color puzzles is what it is. And so his students would have to figure out how to manipulate the perception of color using other colors. They would do it with construction paper. And so I sort of do the same thing with my op art. And I love it when I can make a monochromatic piece and, I can have different shades of purple. Maybe a purple over here is more, has more magenta in it, and a purple over here has more of a blue undertone. And then when you combine them all together, because of the colors that are beside them, they can, it changes the perception. And so it really freaks people out when I say, hey, guess what? This stripe is the exact same color as this stripe. And they're like, no way, And I'm like, yeah, I promise. And, like one time I actually had a swatch painted on a separate chip so that I could hold it up and show them, like,
it's so
here,
great.
I'm going to put the swatch
so
here,
clever.
Stripe, and that's the stripe. And then, hey, look, I'm going to move it over here. And they're like, no. So the eye plays tricks on you.
But isn't that fun? I mean, that's what makes art so fun. It's like, not only is this just so pretty to look at and it's happy and it's just makes you go, oh, this is just makes me happy when I look at it. But then it's a conversation piece because you're like, no, look, these colors and how they play. And it's just, that's what art should do. I just think it's
absolutely
fantastic. Gina, this is just great. I've appreciated so many excellent tips here. And I just ask one more. I wanted to ask you for your words of advice that you would share with any other artist that wants to maybe pursue it full time and wants to start selling their work. What would be your words of advice?
Well, the first piece of advice I have is just to make art every day, to look at it as a job. And hopefully a job that you love. I still love mine, but I still get up, even if I don't feel like painting, I still get up and I do something having to do with my job every day. Most days I do paint, but I mean, you just got to get in the studio and do it. And you'll find that amazing things happen once you get going. It's really, I think that's the way it is with any job. You go in, you kind of sauntering, you're not quite there yet, and then suddenly you get in a groove and it'll happen. So you just got to get in there and do it.
I think that's a great tip.
I know so many artists, they are brilliant artists, but they are the worst salespeople. They can't sell their art to save their lives. And it's mostly because, a lot of people have money blocks, or a lot of artists have this thing where they don't want to be too salesy. And it's not about you being salesy or anything. It's about you believing in what you're making and what you're selling. My first job when I was growing up, I sold cemetery property. I was 17.
Well, you've got a wealth of jobs.
I do. I worked in a phone room. I was a telemarketer. And technically I set the appointments so that the salesman could go out and sell the cemetery property. So I was the first point of contact with these people. But you know what? I believed in what I was selling because I was selling something that would benefit people in the worst time of their lives. And I knew that at 17, and I got hung up. I was cussed out so many times. It just didn't even matter. I knew that what I was doing was going to help someone. And it was one of the best jobs I ever had. And so, as an artist, I truly believe in the value of my work, what it does for people. I had a woman that sent me a message that said, looking at your art is like opening a fresh box of crayons.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Is that not one of the best comments ever?
Absolutely. Especially for your love of crayons.
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah.
She nailed it with that comment.
Perfectly sharpened crayons.
Oh, who doesn't love that? Jeez, that's every artist's dream.
So anyway, I think it's important that
buy
whatever it is that you're selling. So if you're into painting, buy paintings. Go find something that you love and buy it. If you can't afford it, ask the artist if they'll take payments. And enjoy living with it. Live with someone else's art. It's really important because you need to get your brain to understand that this stuff is worth real money. And if you will, forego the Starbucks coffee or, lay off buying the shoes for the month or whatever it is, and buy art, you set a priority in your life. And I live by the law of attraction, and I believe that you're going to attract people who are much like you. And if you buy art, then you're probably going to attract people that buy art. If you place that kind of value on it. So,
that's a wonderful tip. Oh my gosh, this has just been so interesting, Gina. I can't thank you enough for all your time and just sharing all these different perspectives on art. And holy cow, it was like loaded with a lot of tips.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been fun. Oh
my gosh. And I'm just so happy that you are the featured artist for January. And I will definitely have it in all the show notes, everywhere where people can follow you and purchase your artwork. And we'll have a couple of your prints in my shop too for the scholarship fund. So thank you. And happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Mari.
Yay. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like this podcast and you'd like to support it even more, you can join me over on patreon.com/Mari Robeson and become a patron of mine. If you're a patron of mine, you'll receive bonus episodes every month, only for patrons. You'll also receive 20% off all the merchandise in my online shop, marirobeson.bigcartel, and you will be receiving free printables every month that will be of my artwork, and they're some really fun things. You can follow along on Instagram and you can see what I'm creating just for my patrons. I would deeply appreciate it. It would help me keep the lights on, and it would help me pay all the fees that it takes to put together a podcast like this so that I can keep supporting all the artists, keep bringing you great information, keep paying it forward to the next generation of artists. It's just a wonderful thing, and I would really deeply appreciate your support.